It's time now to move on to the homework questions in lesson number 2 in the radicals chapter. And for this lesson, we will focus on adding and subtracting radicals. All right, so let's take a look at question number 1. For question number 1, I need to simplify the following. And you'll notice that the radicals are the same, so root 7. So all you have to do now is take the outside numbers, 5 and negative 3, and you just combine those. So 5 minus 3 is going to be 2, so my final answer here is going to be 2 root 7. Okay, let's move on to the next one. For letter B, once again, I noticed that the radicals are the same. So you can treat these as like terms. So I can take the outside numbers, 2 and negative 8. So ask yourself, what is 2 minus negative 8? Or 2 minus 8, and that's going to be negative 6. And then the root 13 remains the same. So negative 6 times root 13. All right, let's move on to letter C now. And for letter C, I noticed that I do have like radicals over here on the first term and on the third term. And for those two radicals, I need to take a look at the outside numbers here. So 2 plus 11 is going to be 13. So 13 root 6. All right, so now I'm done with those two radicals. And then you'll notice that I'm just left with the negative 6 root 2, so that will just tag along. So 13 times root 6 minus 6 root 2 is your final answer for that one. Okay, let's move on to letter D here. Letter D is not too bad. I do have these invisible ones on the outside for my first two terms. And I noticed that all three of these terms have a root 5. So what that means is I can combine the outside numbers here. So 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 minus 2 is going to be 0. So you can think of this as 0 root 5, or just simply just 0. So 0 would be the better answer for that letter. Okay, let's move on to letter E. The questions on this very first section, they're not too bad because you're just looking at the like radicals. So over here I have a root 10 and a root 10. So those radicals are the same. So I look at the outside numbers, 4 and minus 10. So what is 4 minus 10? Well, that's going to be negative 6. So negative 6 root 10. And then those guys are now gone. And then I just have the 3 root 5. So I can leave that at the very end. So plus 3 root 5. And that's it. All right, let's move on to letter F. Now for letter F, I have a root 3 and a root 2, so those are not like radicals, or the inside number inside the radical sign, they're not the same, so you can't combine these. So this one you just can't simplify. You can only combine radicals if the inside numbers are the same in the radical sign. So you can't simplify, or your final answer is just, the original question. Okay, let's move on to the next section here. Question number 2, we still need to simplify these radicals. And I noticed that I have a root 40 and a root 90, so the inside numbers are not the same. So I can't combine them right from the get-go, so I need to break down both of these radicals. Let's take a look at 40 first. So think of two numbers that multiply to 40. I'm thinking about 4 and 10, so 4 and 10. And then I know that I can continue to break down the number 4 into 2 times 2. And since I'm done breaking down the 4, I'm done with that guy, so just scribble that out. And then on the 10, I can break that down into 2 and 5. And then I'm done with the 10 there. All right, so these are all prime numbers, so I can stop here. I don't need to break this down any further. And now I need to look for pairs. So here's a pair right here. So that pair goes on the outside of the radical. And these numbers right here, the 2 and the 5, they go on the inside. So 2 times 5. And 2 times 5 is going to be 10. So I can erase this and just write just 10. Okay, so after doing all that, let me just erase my tree diagram here. And basically my conclusion now is root 40 is the same thing as 2 root 10. And then plus. Okay, let's take a look at the 90 now. So how can I break down the 90? Well, 90 is, the two numbers that multiply to 90 are 9 and 10. And 9 is the same thing as 3 and 3. And that one's done there. And then if I take a look at the 10 here, two numbers that multiply to 10 are 2 and 5. And those are prime numbers, so I can stop. And then let's look for our pairs here. There's a pair right there, so that's going to be 3 on the outside. and 2 times 5, that's going to be 10, so 10 would go on the inside. So root 90 is 3 root 10. Okay, so if I erase this now, and just move the 3 root 10 over here, what I notice now is the radicals are now the same. I have a root 10 and a root 10, and now I can combine the outside numbers. So 2 plus 3 is going to be 5. So my final answer here is going to be 5 root 10. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Letter B. So I have root 32 and root 8. So the radicals, you can kind of think of this as they're not like terms because inside numbers are not the same. So I need to break down the inside numbers so that I can have the same number, and therefore I can combine the radicals. So let's think of two numbers that multiply to 32. I'm thinking about 4 and 8. And the number 4 I can continue to break down into 2 times 2. And that means the 4 has now been taken care of. And then what about the 8 now? Two numbers that multiply to 8 are 2 and 4. All right, so now the 8's done. And now the 4 here breaks down into 2 times 2. And then I'm done with that 4. Okay, now I need to look for pairs here. So here's a pair right there, and there's a pair. So when you have a pair, the pairs go on the outside of the radical. And then you'll notice that I have one more number that's remaining, so that number will be on the inside now, so root that 2 would go down there. And then in order to kind of finish this off, I know that 2 times 2 is going to be 4, so I have 4 root 2. Okay, so after all that work, let me just erase all of the tree diagrams now. After all that work, my conclusion is that root 32 is going to be 4 root 2. So I can write down root 32 as just 4 root 2 plus, and then I have a root 8. So now I need to work on breaking down the 8 now. So two numbers that multiply to 8 are 4 and 2. And 4 can break down into 2 times 2, and that means this 4 is gone. And after that, just look for pairs. Here's a pair right here. So pairs go on the outside of the radical, and the numbers that don't have pairs, such as this 2 right here, that can go back inside the radical. So root 8 is going to be 2 root 2. Okay, so let me just erase all this. And let me just leave this as 2 root 2. And now you can see that the radicals are now the same, root 2 and root 2, and now I can combine the outside numbers. So 4 plus 2 is going to be 6. So my final answer is 6 root 2 as a final answer. Okay, let's keep on going along. So I think most of the questions, once again, for part 2, we need to break down the radicals so that we can combine the radicals. Right now I have a 12 and a 75. They're not the same, so I need to break this down. Two numbers that multiply to 12 are going to be 4 and 3. And two numbers that break down 4 are 2 and 2. And then I'm done with that. And then take a look at the 2's here. There's my pair there. So pairs go on the outside. And the non-pairs, which is the 3 in this case, that would go on the inside of the radical. Okay, so root 12 is going to be 2 root 3. After that, I'm just going to erase my tree diagram, and I will transfer my answer back up to the top. So 2 root 3 minus, and then what about the 75? Two numbers that multiply to 75. I'm thinking about 25 and 3. The 3 is a prime number, but I can continue breaking down the 25 into 5 times 5. And there's my pair right there. So pairs go on the outside. And my non-pairs, the numbers that don't have a partner, they go back on the inside. So that's going to be 5 root 3. So root 75 is going to be 5 root 3. Let me erase this. And let me write this down as 5 root 3. And now you can see that the radicals are the same. So now take the outside numbers. 2 minus 5 is going to be negative 3. So my final answer is negative 3 root 3. All right, so once you do enough of these, it's not too bad. Over here, I do have some outside numbers here, a 3 and a 2. But once again, let's take a look at the inside numbers first. I have a 20 and an 80. So my first job is to break down the inside numbers. So let's take a look at the 20 here. Two numbers that multiply to 20 are 2 and 10. And two numbers that multiply to 10 are 2 and 5. Okay, and now the 10's gone there. And right away I can see that I have a pair there. So pairs go on the outside. And my non-pair, which is the 5, that goes on the inside. And one more thing that you might one more thing that you should remember is we had a 3 at the beginning of the problem here. So I take this 3, and the 3 really multiplies with the 2. So 3 times 2 is going to be 6. So this is going to be 6 root 5. All right, so after all that, 3 root 20 simplifies to 6 root 5. Okay, let me just erase my tree diagram. And I will recopy the simplified answer back to the top. So that's going to break down to 6 root 5. Okay, and then there's a minus sign. And then let's break down the 80 now. Two numbers that multiply to 80, I'm thinking of 8 and 10. And then 8 breaks down into 4 and 2. That means the 8's gone. And I know the 4 will break down to 2 times 2. That means that 4's gone. And over on the other side, two numbers that break down to 10 are 2 and 5. And that should be it. Let's go ahead and find the pairs now. So here's a pair, and there's a pair. So pairs go on the outside, so this pair is going to be a 2. That pair is going to be a 2. And this number right here, the 5, goes back on the inside, so that's going to be root 5. And if you think about this, 2 times 2 is going to be 4, so that simplifies into 4 root 5. And just remember, there's a 2 at the start of the problem here, so if I bring the 2 down, 2 times 4 is going to be 8. So that all breaks down into 8 root 5. Okay, so my next step is I'm just going to erase all this. And I will write 8 root 5 over here. So 2 root 80, once you simplify, that breaks down into 8 root 5. And the good news is I know that my steps are probably correct because the radicals have the same number on the inside. And now I can take the outside numbers, 6 and negative 8. If I combine those, 6 minus 8 is going to be negative 2. So my final answer is going to be negative 2 root 5. And that's my final answer for that one. Okay, let's move on to letter E now. I got 3 terms now. Let's take a look at my inside numbers. I have a 75, a 3, and a 147. Let's go ahead and break down the 75 here. The numbers that I'm thinking of are 25, 25, and 3. And 25 breaks down into 5 and 5. So that 25 is now gone. So my pair here is a 5. So pairs go on the outside. And this 3 would go on the inside there. So root 75 breaks down into 5 root 3. Okay, let's erase this. So this is going to be 5 root 3 minus root 3. I can't break down the 3 for the second term there, so that can remain the same, plus. And then let's think about 147. Two numbers that multiply to 147 are 3 and 49. And then the 49 can break down into 7 times 7. And my pair right now is a 7, so pairs go on the outside. And this non-pair, the 3, goes on the inside. So root 147 breaks down into 7 root 3. Okay, let me just erase this. So this is going to be 7 root 3. And now you should notice that all the inside numbers are the same. And after that, we can just look at the outside numbers. Over here, there's an invisible 1 here. So 5 minus 1 is going to be 4, and 4 plus 7 is going to be 11. So my final answer here is going to be 11 root 3. All right, I think we have 3 more questions to go, and then we're done. All right, so I've got a few more questions where I need to add or subtract radicals, and I definitely need to simplify my radicals before I start combining like terms. All right, so for this one here, I have a 48 there, so let's break down the 48. Two numbers that multiply to 48 are 6 and 8. Two numbers that multiply to 6 are 3 and 2. And after that, I can erase the 6 here, and this 8. Two numbers that multiply to 8 are 2 and 4. And then two numbers that multiply to 4 are 2 and 2. So basically for the way I kind of approach these questions, anytime I break down a number, I just go back and just scribble it out so that I don't reuse it again later on my problem. After that, I look for pairs. Here's a pair here, and there's a pair there. So that's a 2, that's a 2, and then the 3 goes on the inside. So if I take 2 times 2, that's going to be 4. And just remember at the very beginning of the problem, I still have a 5 here. So if I bring this 5 down here, 5 times 4, 5 times 4 is going to be 20. So if I erase that now, I do have a 20 here. So I have 20 root 3 after I fully simplify. Okay, let's go back and erase all the work here. So 5 root 48 simplifies to 20 root 3 minus 7 root 3. And once again, after you do all the work correctly, you should see some like terms there, and then I can combine I can now focus on the outside numbers and combine them. So 20 minus 7 is going to be 13 root 3. Okay, let's keep on going here. Okay, I got 3 terms again. So I have an 8 here, I have an 18, and I have a 2 there. So let's go ahead and break down the numbers here. 2 numbers that multiply to 8 are 4 and 2. And 2 numbers that break down 4 are 2 times 2. And let's go ahead and find my pairs. There's a pair, so pairs go on the outside. And my non-pairs go on the inside. So I have 2 root 2 for root 8. And then I have a 3 here, so 3 times 2 is going to be 6. So I have a 6 root 2 after I fully simplify. Okay, and just like all my previous problems, I will go back now and erase the tree diagram. And this 3 root 8 is the same thing as 6 root 2 plus. Okay, let's take a look at the 18 now. 2 numbers that break down 18. I'm thinking of 9 and 2. And then 9 can break down into 3 and 3. And after that, I can erase this 9 there. And 3 times 3, the pair would be 3, so pairs go on the outside. And the non-pair, which is 2, goes on the inside. And just like the previous question here, I do have a number on the outside here. So 5 times 3 is going to be 15. So that's going to be 15 root 2. Okay, let me go ahead and erase all this. And that's going to be plus 15 root 2, and then at the very end here, I guess I can just copy down the 6 root 2 because I can't really break down the inside 2 any further. And I notice that all the inside numbers are the same, so that means I can combine the outside numbers. So I have a 6 plus 15 minus 6. You'll notice that this term and that term, you know, they're the same terms, so if you're subtracting them, you can just cancel them off. And now you're left with just 15 root 2, which is just the middle term there. Okay, I think I just have one more question to go, and then we're done the questions in this homework video guide. And the good thing for this very last one is I don't really need to break down any radicals. Let's just go ahead and find the like radicals here. So 3 root 7 and 4 root 7. So if I take 3 plus 4, that's going to be 7. So 7 root 7. After that, those guys are done. And then I have a 2 and a negative 1 here. So 2 minus 1 is going to be 1. So plus 1 root 11. Or you can just write your final answer as 7 root 7 plus root 11. And that should do it for that particular question. Okay, so that concludes this video homework guide.